Yes, people, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I'm going to be discussing everything that you need to know about heat acclimation training in combat sports. Heat acclimation training became quite popular a few years ago in the combat sports space. And although it was quite trendy at the time, not a lot of people are touching on this subject anymore. And it's really something that you have to use throughout your whole career, especially if you engage in kind of active or passive sweating in the final part of your weight cut on fight week. If you don't know what heat acclimation training is or how to perform this during your fight camp, then this is what I'm going to be touching on in this video. So I'm going to be running through what heat acclimation training is, the benefits you can get from heat acclimation training and how that relates to combat sports and weight cutting. I'm also going to be talking about how to actually implement heat acclimation training, some considerations as well for you to think about so it doesn't impact your health or your training quality during fight camp as well. First of all, what is heat acclimation training? Heat acclimation training is a type of training where individuals will expose themselves to heat for a set period of time in a certain temperature. And the goal of this training is to exert a range of physiological adaptations which will help that individual better tolerate being exposed to heat and also reduce the risk of heat-related illnesses. Heat acclimation training was first discovered in the 1940s in miners in South Africa, and what they found is that the individuals that underwent heat acclimation training were better able to tolerate the heat and have a higher work output. After scientists found that heat acclimation training could benefit individuals being exposed and having to perform in the heat, this transferred well into the military. So soldiers who were required to perform in high temperatures would also undergo a form of heat acclimation training to improve their output and their performance when in those extreme environments. And this transferred really well into a wide range of different sports. So heat acclimation training is used in ultra endurance athletes, runners, motorsports, football, American football, and obviously now it's kind of weaved its way into the combat sports space, where athletes who undergo heat acclimation training are able to have more efficient and smoother weight cuts and reduce the risk of experiencing any negative side effects associated with weight cutting. Moving on to the adaptations that occur. So the adaptations are dependent on the intensity, the frequency, number of exposures to the environment that you're trying to acclimate to. So when individuals undergo heat acclimation training, you want to try and expose yourself to the environment that you're going to face when you're performing. So for most combat athletes, that's going to either be a sauna or a bath. So you want to make sure that you're exposing yourselves to the scenario that you're going to face during a weight cut. The physiological adaptations that can happen when you expose yourself to these hot environments are massive. They're going to really help you in terms of how you sweat and how you tolerate heat. So the first real benefit is when individuals undergo heat acclimation training, you're able to increase the size of your sweat glands. So when we're born with all of our sweat glands. So there's millions of sweat glands on our body, and this doesn't change from birth. But what we can change is the actual size of your sweat glands. So because your sweat glands increase, this means that another adaptation that occurs is you increase your total sweat volume. So individuals who are heat acclimated, will be able to sweat a lot more in a lot less time, which is really important for us because when it's time to cut weight, you kind of want to do it in the most efficient way possible. So you don't want to stretch this out for a really long period of time and expose yourself to heat for longer than you need to. So increasing the size of your sweat glands and being able to sweat more is such an important benefit of this type of training. Another benefit is that you can increase your thermal comfort. So your rate of perceived exertion, when it comes to exposing yourself to the heat, you'll start to fatigue a lot later or feel the effects of the heat a lot later if you are heat acclimated compared to someone who isn't. So if you're in a sauna with someone or if you're in a bath, if you're acclimated, you'll probably find that people will start walking out before you because you're better able to tolerate the heat and have an improved thermal comfort. So again, that can benefit you as well during the weight cut. Another benefit as well is that the onset of sweating is reduced. So the time it takes to sweat is reduced. Again, this is really important for you because whenever you're cutting weight and you're in a bath or in a sauna, there's always that kind of lag time for when you start to sweat. And what we want to do is reduce that lag time so we can reduce your heat exposure. And if we can reduce your heat exposure, then that means that your risk of heat-related illnesses will significantly reduce. Another really important benefit is the reduction of strain on your cardiovascular system. So what we find is people who are heat acclimated have a lower resting heart rate or lower heart rate when exposed to the heat. And they're able to drive blood around the body to the surface of the skin a lot more efficiently as well. So when you're dehydrated, a major sign of dehydration is your heart rate going up because blood volume reduces. And when blood volume reduces, it can put an additional strain on your heart to pump that blood around your body. So if you're able to keep your heart rate low and efficiently send that blood to the muscles and the surface of the skin, that's a really key indicator that you're able to tolerate the heat but also cool down. Because when you cool down, the mechanism of cooling down is literally sending your blood to the surface of the skin and the muscles where that process can occur. So there's less strain on your cardiovascular system. What we also find is that your core body temperature is also reduced at the onset of heat exposure as well. So obviously a rise in core body temperature above kind of 40 degrees can be fatal. So one aspect of fatigue, especially during a weight cut, the main reason why these athletes fatigue and have heat-related illness is because their core body temperature rises to points where you can experience kind of these heat-related illnesses and obviously have symptoms of these like dizziness, fatigue, getting ill or sick, increased heart rate as well. So if your core body temperature is lower, that means that potentially you could spend more time in that sauna before you start to feel fatigued. One of the last adaptations that occur is a reduced electrolyte losses through your sweat. So what will happen is you'll sweat, but your body won't let go of that sodium if you are heat acclimated. So what will happen is it will hold on to the sodium, and this will maintain blood volume, which is really important during a weight cut. And there was a study that looked at the electrolyte losses of people who are heat acclimated compared to people who aren't. And per litre of sweat, the unacclimated person was losing about 1.2 to 1.4 grams of salt per litre. And the acclimated athlete losing about 0.2 to 0.3 grams of salt per litre. So this can be really beneficial. How can we actually implement heat acclimation training into your week? A couple things to think about is when you're actually doing your heat acclimation training. I was working with a fighter once who decided to do their heat acclimation training in the morning after their S&C work, which is absolutely fine. But then what they didn't tell me is that they were sparring later that day. And obviously after the sparring session, messaged me saying he didn't feel too great, and obviously we jumped on a call, we dived into it, and what we found out is that exactly that he done his heat acclimation training before a sparring session. You're most likely going to be slightly dehydrated after your heat acclimation training, although you don't necessarily have to be in a dehydrated state to get these adaptations. But what I always promote is to try and drink fluids when you're in there, even before, when you're in there, and after, so that you reduce your risk of being excessively dehydrated for the rest of the day if you do have an additional training session later on in the day after you're doing your heat acclimation training. Always try and do it away from your training sessions and give yourself a good few hours to recover and rehydrate. And another thing I would think about is the method which you choose to do your heat acclimation training. If you choose to cut weight in a bath or a sauna, then obviously do your heat acclimation training by the method you're going to use on fight week. I always promote bath over a sauna because a bath, you can control it a lot more, whereas a sauna, the variables aren't really as controllable as a bath. So what we could utilize here in this bath strategy is think about the temperature, the duration, and the frequency. We want to think about the temperature, so begin at the lower end, so 37, 38 degrees for 20 to 22 minutes, and then a frequency of twice per week. And then we want to have controlled hyperthermia. So we want to slowly increase the exposure and the temperature of the heat that you're sitting in over a set number of weeks, exactly like we're doing here. So for week 3 and 4, okay, you can maybe go between the 38 to 40 mark and the duration 22 to 24 minutes. Again, 2 times per week. And then week 5 to 6, you can push it a little bit further up to the maximal end, which is 41 to 42 degrees for a duration of 24, 26 minutes. And again, two times per week. So to track your progress, it's really important to think about the following things. So the bath length, the temperature, the time that you start sweating, the weight before, weight after, and total weight loss in kilograms. Because this way we can see the numbers going up week on week. You'll probably find that the onset of sweating is going to reduce, and the total amount of weight lost is also going to increase as well. It should do. And then that's where you know that you've got those adaptations by tracking things and subjectively how you feel in those temperatures as well. Like I said before, it's really important to hydrate after your heat acclimation training sessions. So to do that, you want to weigh yourself before, weigh yourself after. So this scenario here, they're 74 before, 73 after. That means that they've lost 1 kilo. You want to replace 150% of the fluids lost. So for this individual, they'd have to drink 1.5 litres to fully replenish, and that would take 1 to 2 hours for you to fully rehydrate after a heat acclimation training session. Again, never drink plain water because you're just going to dilute your blood even more. And essentially what that's going to do is tell your body that you're in a hydrated state, and you're going to start releasing that water that you've consumed. So we want to make sure that the water that we're consuming is locked into our body, locked into our cells, And we do this by obviously consuming electrolytes. And lastly, to finish off, some really important considerations to take into account whilst doing this is to try and never do it alone, because you are exposing yourself to heat. You don't know what could happen. So you want to kind of have someone in the house at least, if anything does go wrong, which it shouldn't if it's done correctly. But you always want to think about safety first. Don't push it too far. So stick to the limits here, and you don't have to do more than you need to get these adaptations. So don't sit in there for 35 minutes at 43, 44 degrees. You're just going to maybe increase your risk of heat illness, which we don't want to do. And lastly, practice makes perfect. So practice the baths. What you don't want to do is get to the last part of your weight cut and you don't know what to do. You want to kind of know how to run the baths, get the temperature right, put the thermometers in. Obviously, you don't have to go into a wrap because we're not trying to induce severe dehydration. We're just trying to expose yourself to a little bit of heat to exert some positive physiological adaptations that will benefit you during your weight cut. So if you found this video useful, please feel free to like, comment or subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.